Welcome to Econ Nerds Live, a celebration and discussion of economics done weekly. I'm your host, Matt Hill. With me, as usual, is Ariel. Ariel, welcome. Doing it on Zoom this week. We're doing it on Zoom, so if anything seems different to viewers, listeners, blame Zoom, not our usual fancy recording. Ariel, how are you?
Doing great.
And we have a guest. We're very happy to have Andrew Miller from the Substack Changing Lanes. And I also believe you have a forthcoming book, The End of Driving. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when does that come out? Does it come out this month, or is that coming out in the fall?
Until a few weeks ago, it was to come out next week. But as it is, it's coming out, I believe the date is 30th of September. So
okay.
6-7 weeks to go.
6-7 weeks till driving is over. I can't wait till driving is over. Can you give the listeners a little bit of background on you? So your Substack is primarily focused on transportation. It seems driverless cars. Maybe give us a background of how you sort of arrived at that topic.
Sure. So I started my career after I spent my 20s in academia and right before I got my PhD, I said, I don't really want to be a professor. That was a bad use of the last 10 years. But I pivoted and went to work for the civil service here in Canada. So I spent 12 years doing what I was interested in, which was transportation, moving people, especially in cities. And I did it all. I advised the government on what projects to invest in. I oversaw the whole capital and operating envelope for transport for the province of Ontario. I designed a rapid transit line from scratch for the city immediately to Toronto's west, like a new extension off of the subway line. And on the basis of all that, I was asked to join Sidewalk Labs, which was Google's smart city arm. They had grand visions of building a city of the future in Toronto. And they wanted me to head up the mobility side of things in Toronto. So most of that job was about trying to get better transit built, but it was also thinking hard about driverless cars, because Sidewalk Labs was an Alphabet company. Waymo is an Alphabet company. So we were taking very seriously the idea that Waymo and other driverless vehicles would be something we had to design for. So I was designing infrastructure for driverless cars. How would you design a curb or a loading dock differently if you knew the vehicle using it would not have a human in it? That was the assignment or part of it. And that was a wonderful job, but unfortunately the pandemic, among other things, killed the project and ultimately killed the company. But I didn't lose my taste for thinking about how the end of driving automation is going to affect all of our lives. So in the last 5 years, I've been thinking about it, and that led me to writing about it. Not only the book, The End of Driving, but also my own weekly newsletter, Changing Lanes, on the same subject.
Yeah, and you cover a variety of topics as well. You don't just cover driverless cars, like you cover microtransit, I've seen, and then your most recent post was on the Cybertruck, comparing it to the Edsel, and then you even have comedic posts. That you had a recent Colombo post that was quite humorous. So
you're only the second person who said they liked that, but the first person was wants to remain anonymous, but is a prominent executive at a self-driving firm. So I was like, okay, I'm reaching the right audience.
So you 2 likes. Any dislikes, or did anybody unsubscribe because they said I didn't come here for Colombo and pop music mashups.
The beautiful thing about Substack is maybe not beautiful. The ugly thing about Substack is every time you post, a bunch of people unsubscribe because you've just reminded them that you exist. But I have very deliberately, for my own mental health, I get a nice alert every time someone subscribes. But if someone nopes out, I never hear about it. So I only hear about the good news. That's how I'm able to keep going.
That's perfect. That's perfect, because we're programmed to fixate on the bad news, and you'll think about it constantly, or at least that's my experience. There could be 100 good comments and 1 bad comment, and it's like ruins my day. For fun, we always like to start with a little bit of a news quiz. So we thought we'd do like a transportation quiz. So Ariel, do you have a transportation quiz / news quiz for us?
I do. So it's more a transportation than a news quiz, but has some recent transportation related facts for you guys. So I've got 3 questions for today. So Andrew, typically I give some multiple choice options before you have to pick an answer. And our guest last week beat Matt. So that's your goal for this week.
Yeah. Humiliate me, hopefully.
Sock it to me.
Okay. So our first question, based on usage rates in Austin and Atlanta, who completes more rides each day? A, the typical Uber driver, or B, a Waymo robo taxi?
I'm going to go with the Uber driver. I'm guessing. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I know the answer to this. I think it's actually the Waymo.
Andrew is correct. It is the Waymo. They are completing more rides than 99% of Uber drivers. So certainly.
And Andrew, is this because they're running longer than the typical Uber driver, or are they actually complete? Would they complete like the same route faster than an Uber driver?
It's the former. It's that Uber drivers work when they want to work, when it's appropriate for them to work. But the Waymo, because it doesn't have those concerns, the Waymo can run 24/7, subject to suitable maintenance.
Okay, so move to question 2. So we covered cars and ground transportation on number 1. So number 2 is, which European city has been testing rowboats or autonomous boats? Okay, your options are A, Venice, B, Paris, C, Copenhagen, D, Amsterdam, or E, Stockholm.
I'm going to have to go with Copenhagen, would be just my guess, based on, I don't know, cultural factors. Seems like they would be the most innovative of those places. But Andrew, do you know this?
I don't. I was waiting for you to say London, because it is generally the case that the UK is further ahead than its peer European nations on automation. But since you didn't say London, I have to take I would have said Copenhagen. Did you say Amsterdam? Is that one of my options?
Amsterdam is one of the options.
Well, then I'll go Amsterdam.
Andrew, you are 2 for 2. It is Amsterdam. So they're testing them in the canals for autonomous boats. Okay.
Then, well, mathematically impossible for me to win here. So let's go. Let's go to the third one.
Okay, third one, we're going to air transportation. Overture's most anticipated flight route is expected to be Newark to London with the supersonic flight. What would the new approximate flight time be? Okay, so how long is it going to take to get from basically New York City to London on a supersonic flight? Your options are 2 hours, 3.5, 5 hours, or 6.5 hours.
I will go with 3.5.
What was the first option? Was it 2.5?
2 hours.
2 hours.
I'll say 2.
Okay, Matt has rescued his reputation on this one. It is 3.5 hours.
Yes,
so
that
it
makes
approximately
sense.
cuts the time in half. So it usually is a 6.5 to 7 hour flight. So
okay, awesome. Well, congrats, Andrew. So let's talk a little bit about the end of driving. And so you outlined sort of a, I don't know, best case scenario or dream scenario where, we have a bunch of driverless cars. It's relatively cheap. If I want to go, maybe I don't even have a car in this world. And every time I want to go somewhere, I just order up the driverless car. It comes, it grabs me. Like I said, it's cheap. I mean, this has been my dream literally been my dream since I was like 16 years old and I started driving. And I always said, if I was a millionaire or if I was ever super rich, the first thing I would buy is a driver, because I hated driving so much. And so that is basically this world. Like, this world could be available. And so how do we get there, or how close are we? It seems like there's some barriers, first being technology. So where are we on the technology? Does that technology exist already? Or is like Waymo and the Tesla robotaxis not quite there yet?
It depends on what context you want it in. So as William Gibson said, the future is here, but it's not evenly distributed. Matt, you're in LA, so you can take a Waymo to at least parts of town whenever you like. Ariel, I don't know where you live, but if you were to live in San Francisco, you'd have most areas of the downtown, and it gets bigger all the time. It's creeping down the bay to include getting closer and closer to San Jose. And if you're in Atlanta or you're in Tempe, Arizona, you can do this now. And if you live in one of the bigger cities in China, in Beijing or Shanghai, you can do this now. But if you're anywhere else in the world, it's just still science fiction. And part of that has to do with the weather. Like the technology is not there for snow conditions, icy conditions. It's not even clear that it's 100% reliable in rainy conditions, like heavy driving rain conditions. But we're getting closer all the time. Uh, Not for nothing is this technology coming out now in the United States Sun Belt. That's where the technology works. But
When is it coming to New York City? That's where I live.
Waymo is talking about coming to New York. They're doing a pilot right now, and they were supposed to be in upstate New York in Buffalo last winter. I never heard if how much that was a success. And that's because between you and me and all your listeners, everyone understood that Waymo operating in Buffalo wasn't because they really wanted to be in Buffalo. It's because they wanted to be in Manhattan, but we're trying to get the governor on board by starting upstate. However, if you can operate in Buffalo, you can operate in Toronto, you can operate in any city in the snow belt. So there's hope. There's hope that Waymo is going to get here sooner rather than later. The issue in Manhattan is, as far as I can tell, Manhattan is the final boss for robotaxis, right? Because it's not only you got extreme heat in the summer, but you got snow and ice in the winter. And if there is a more chaotic environment to drive in North America, I'm not aware of what it would be. Cyclists, pedestrians who are walking here and don't want a robot to be getting in their way. I would have thought that they would take their time to build up to Manhattan, but the fact that they're want to come there soon says they're Waymo's confident in its technology, and B, they know where the money is.
Do you have an opinion on which of the technologies is superior between the Tesla self-driving and the Waymo automation?
I absolutely do. In fact, I've written a whole article about this, which I was commissioned to write for a magazine, and they decided to go a different direction. So now I'm trying to place it. So if any of your listeners are magazine editors and want 3,000 to 6,000 words on Tesla versus Waymo technology, call me. But I'll spoil it. I'll give it away right now. For a long time, like since the 90s, we've been developing driverless technology. And what we've assumed that we needed was what we call sensor fusion. So the car uses cameras, the car uses radar, the car uses LiDAR, the car even uses sonar. It builds up a model of the world using all of these different sensoria, if I can use that term, and then a computer combines them into a consistent model of the world, and that's what it uses to navigate. It was just within about 10 years ago that Tesla said, nuts to you guys, all that's really expensive. Let's just use cameras. And the advantage of that is cameras are really cheap. Ever since we've developed mobile phones with cameras in them, if you could build a self-driving car that only uses cameras, it'd be so cheap to deliver, was the thesis. And also, humans have cameras. Humans don't have LiDAR. Humans don't have sonar. So in theory, a car should be able to drive with just cameras. That was Tesla's bet, was we can do this with just cameras.
But their bet was also on data as well, right? Because they had all the Teslas driving around and they were just going to collect a ton of data. Was that
yeah, and that's so, like, we all know in a world of AI and large language models that large data sets give you lots of information. That was the bet. And if you were going to take the other side of the bet, you'd say a few things. You'd say, one, yeah, LiDAR is expensive now, but it's getting cheaper every year. And indeed, 10 years ago, a LiDAR unit cost 10 grand. It's a tenth of that now. And there's no reason that it won't go lower. So the LiDAR bet wasn't a good bet. The data bet was also not a good bet, because what you see with all of that data is in your training set is people driving, but driving under normal conditions and not making mistakes. There are very few edge cases in the data set, but if all you do is train a car on video of a car driving well, it doesn't know how to handle a difficult situation. So the data, it's not to say that it isn't helpful, but the data play was far less compelling, if you look at it, than it might have seemed. And then to me, the final argument is okay, let's stipulate that cameras are cheap, and let's stipulate the data set is great. Wonderful. We've trained a car to drive as well as a human. To which I say, why are we setting the bar so low? Yeah,
Well,
it's true.
Speak
It's
for
true
yourself.
that-
I'm above average driver, as 90% of drivers are, right?
I'm also an above average driver, but I don't shoot lasers out of my eyes so I can have millimeter senses of how far away everything around me is at 360 degrees. If a car can do that, why wouldn't we want it to do that? Like, why wouldn't we want to have a car that is better than a human driver, which is what Waymo is aiming to produce? And yet the Tesla model, because it's just cameras and it's the data set that they have, is going to hit the level of the best human driver, which I appreciate and is better than nothing. But come on, people, let's aim higher. I think that let 1,000 flowers bloom. I would love to be a lot of robotaxi companies, but if you had to pick one that is going to succeed biggest and first, to me, it's got to be Waymo. They've got all the tailwinds and none of the headwinds.
All right. So technologically, it sounds like, okay, Waymo, you said they would like to be in Manhattan if that's the final boss, and they think they can do it. The technology is almost there. What about regulatory? Like, are cities going to allow this? Or are we going to be stuck where it's just like maybe a few cities have it and then it's sort of banned in other places? I know Uber was banned in places. It probably still is banned in some places in Europe. Are there regulatory barriers?
The regulatory barriers are what we want them to be. Let me give you two examples at opposite extremes. So on the one hand, you've got San Francisco, where as much as there has been a little bit of friction with residents, as of this summer, Waymos are allowed on Market Street. And Market Street is a street that you're not allowed to have a private car on. And taxis are allowed, buses are allowed, ambulances are allowed, but Uber is not allowed. And it's not allowed because they want Market Street to have to be a particular kind of space, a safe space. Waymo's being allowed in. Uber isn't. And Uber's really mad about that. Leave aside whether they've got a right to be mad. That shows you, I think that is like the first snowball beginning to roll down the hill of saying this is a space where we don't trust lots of people, but we will trust a Waymo. So I'm not aware of any street yet where the only car that's allowed, other than like an emergency vehicle, is a self-driving one. But I know it's coming. When I was at Sidewalk and designing the city of the future, that was something that was very much on our horizon, was gradually designating some areas for self-driving cars only. So if we thought of it, other people have thought about it, and we can see a trend in that direction. Conversely, the state of Kentucky earlier this year just banned self-driving trucks. Not that anyone wanted to put self-driving trucks, but the Teamsters Union said we can see a win here, so they got a law passed in advance saying no self-driving trucks in our state because it would be bad for jobs. Now the governor vetoed it, they did get the legislature to pass it. So there are an awful lot of people who see Waymo, see driving automation. Their first, last, and only question is this going to take away jobs? And if it is, we don't want it. So the Waymo example in New York, I gather there are representatives in the city who are taking the same position that we stand against anything that will take away jobs from the hardworking taxi and ride hail operators. Maybe it won't win in New York. Maybe it didn't win in Kentucky. There's going to be places where it wins, where the technology is just fenced out by regulatory fiat.
That's sort of how I remember Uber rolling out, where there was federalism, where some places it was allowed and some places it wasn't. And it was just so much obviously better, like, than taxis, that eventually it seemed like just because people wanted it, it's almost, my understanding is, I don't think there's a city in the United States where you can't get an Uber. Do you think maybe something similar would happen with driverless cars, where in the places where it exists, it's just so much better, it's cheaper, people like it? I mean, right now, people are paying more for the driverless option just because I guess they prefer not to talk to the human, or they prefer the novelty. So will federalism save us in that scenario? I guess cars on the table. Obviously, I'm super pro driverless cars. It's by save us, I mean like the cities that allow it will, or cities that disallow it will eventually just sort of be forced by their constituents to allow it.
So the Uber playbook that you mentioned, one was to just say, lol, we're Uber, show up in a town, start operating, and hope that they could get a critical mass of users to support it before the bylaws caught up.
Yeah.
But the other half of that playbook was someone visiting a city where Uber existed, using it, loving it, then going back to their home city and saying, why don't we have this? Why do I have to walk in the snow to a thoroughfare to find a taxi instead of just being able to, and oh, look, I still have the app on my phone. Like, it's right here. It's ready to go. Uber just needs to be present. I think it's going to be more the latter. You're never going to see any robotaxi company, even Tesla, which can be pretty wild and woolly sometimes.
Yeah.
They're never going to roll into a city and just try and operate a robotaxi firm without permission. But there are going to be people absolutely who go to Las Vegas, where Zoox is operating, or go to San Francisco, where Waymo is operating, or go to Austin, where Tesla is operating, try it, like it, and then agitate for it to happen in their own city. And the example that I like to use is that I don't think I've ever ridden in an elevator with an operator in it. But once upon a time, every elevator had an operator. And the idea of an automatic elevator scared people. I think it scared them until they used it once and it worked. And then they never thought about it again. This is like that. If we could get everyone in the United States to ride a Waymo once, the amount of fear and mistrust for this technology would flatline immediately. The more people see it, the more people use it, the more comfortable they will be. So it's going to win, but it's going to take time.
Yeah, and I think the analogy is like, imagine driverless cars came first, and like we had them forever, and they're much safer than the human cars, and then we said, okay, we're going to do human cars. Like, everyone would be up in arms. Like, that's so dangerous. Why would you trust a human with a car? So, okay, so if we allow that the technology exists, and this hopefully this federalism overcomes the regulation, the last piece, which you outline in an article on your Substack on June 3rd, was all about like these cognitive biases, why people might not want to transition to this driverless world. So what are some of these cognitive biases that might stop us?
There are a lot of them. I mean, if you study behavioral economics, you find there's all sorts of ways that you can describe it. But for me, they all boil down to, they're all species of loss aversion, which is that put formally is something like, we would rather, we overrate the possibility of losing a thing and underrate the possibility of gaining a thing. It hurts more to lose $10 than it feels good to gain $10. So applied to driverless cars, sure, you would gain safety, you would gain convenience, you would gain more money in your wallet because you've got fewer costs to pay. All of this if you are relying on a robotaxi to get you around than owning your own car. But you lose control. You lose freedom. You lose the ability to store things when you're trip chaining. And that the fears of things that you're going to lose for many people are going to bite harder than the kiss of the things that they gain. So it's going to, again, if we want to hasten this, we have to find ways to soothe people's loss aversion. Or we have to wait until people grow up never having only owned a car, and so they don't feel that they have anything to lose. But that approach takes decades. I would rather use the shorter term approach of trying to get people to overcome their loss aversion and embrace a driverless future now.
But why? I mean, why couldn't I just have like a minivan for my road trips, and maybe I would have like, this is me personally, like a mid-90s like Japanese stick shift car for me to like drive around for fun when I want to, and then for the vast majority, 95% of my trips, I'm just taking a driverless car.
Well, I think that there's some possibility of that. I mean, my personal model for how this is going to work is that the robotaxi swaps in for one vehicle. So households that have two cars now feel comfortable going to one car for the trip chaining or for a long distance trip to the cottage or what have you. But they don't need the second car for day to day. They can use a robotaxi for that. And for people in cities who maybe have one car, they can go to zero cars. They can use robotaxis much of the time and then just use car share or borrow a car or find some other solution rather than go to the expense and trouble of owning even one car. So I think it can work. But again, you have to get people over the idea that the robotaxi is going to be costing them more than they want to pay in terms of autonomy or freedom or safety or convenience or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think in the post you sort of outlined that, you want to frame this to people where you're losing a lot by keeping a car, like, and just in terms of like, you're going to be financially much better off if you switch to, taking more driverless trips, especially when those driverless trips become cheaper than the Uber option, right?
Yeah, I mean, the classic way you beat loss aversion in anything is you have to frame what you're currently doing as loss.
As a loss, yeah.
Yeah, so, you have to pay an annual fee to your insurance just for the privilege of driving a car. That's costing you. You have to go to the trouble of getting depending on the part of the country you live in, your winter tires swapped out. And then swap back in again. What a pain in the neck that is. That's a loss for you. Like, you have to find a way to frame all the things that you take for granted as losses. And then the thing that you can gain is freedom from all of those losses. So it's, we need to get Don Draper in here to tell the right story.
That's often how it is. It's like coming up with the right language to make people receptive to whatever it is, the policy or the technology. Ariel, you don't have a car, right? You're at zero cars, or
I am at zero cars in New York City.
So do you go to -1 in this world? How does that work?
No, I think what it would be is, we use a ride share or we fly somewhere and then rent a car when we're traveling. So, we've rented a car long term here in Wisconsin, where I am right now. I've got little kids, right? And one of the things that would be valuable or is attractive to me about owning a car, even in New York, is like, the car seats are there. I don't have to haul them out of the car. I have all of their stuff. I have a place to like set stuff down and know it's there and then shuttle back and forth with the kids. Like, what is the solution, I guess, to having these robotaxis show up and what are the kids doing in the backseat, right? Like, that seems to me like another logistics problem. If you don't want to have to be hauling these enormous, 5-point harness, contraptions that are supposed to be installed in a particular way, right? Like, can we get a built-in car seat? Like, that would be my dream, right? Like, it just folds down. It's a booster seat. You're higher. You've got it all set too.
So in the end of driving, my co-authors and I spend a fair bit of time on this, and we do conclude that families with young children are going to be the absolute last group to convert, if ever they do, for all the reasons you've just described. It's a really hard problem. We know what a solution would have to look like. And I think one of them is we either need robotaxis that have got child seats that are like permanently installed. And so you press the button and say, I need one with a child seat. And it is just as convenient and quick and easy to get as all the rest. Another way to do it would be a standard, like a universal standard for car seats. And then you build the robotaxi such that it's got in the back seat, like staples that jut out from the seats that are part of the car frame that you can just plug and play. I won't spoil it for your audience, but I saw the new Fantastic Four movie on the weekend. And there's an extended joke sequence in there about trying to fit the Fantasticar with a child seat and how difficult it is to install. And it's like, Mr. Fantastic is supposed to be the world's smartest man. Why doesn't he have a permanent installation for this? Like, that's the future, is making plug and play car seats where you don't have to mess around with them.
So you worked for Sidewalk Labs, which, thought about what cities would look like. And if you look at the history of urbanization, especially like a city like Barcelona is like this, where you see different parts of the city. When they were built, they were designed for the transportation of the day. So you have the old city where the streets are very narrow. There's no grid system. That's when people primarily walked. Then you have the part of the city, I think it's called the Jample, where it's like, that's when trams first came in. And so it's denser, but it's not as dense as the old city. And it's sort of designed with these big, big streets where the trams would go down. And then, of course, you have the suburbs, which are designed with the car in mind. And so a lot of our, West Coast and southern cities are like, LA or whatever, Atlanta, are designed the way they look because they grew up with the car. So how would like a new city, and you could imagine this in, say like an African country where, the African countries sort of skipped phone lines. They just moved right to, when they developed, they just moved right to the cell phone. And so they have cell towers, but there's no like phone lines running everywhere. So, what does a city that comes of age in the driverless car world look like?
Yeah, you are absolutely right that cities, when they are created, are defined by the transport technology of their day. My favorite example in that regard is, this might be apocryphal, but as I understand it, Salt Lake City, Brigham Young had it laid out such that a horse and buggy could execute a 180-degree turn. The streets had to be wide enough so that if you were on the right side, you'd go all the way around. And so Salt Lake City has got very wide streets for a city laid out before the automobile.
Was Brigham Young really always going in the wrong direction? Did he just make wrong turns all the time? And he's like, I need to be able to turn my buggy around.
He wanted flexibility.
Okay.
So to your question, you're right to think about new cities, because changing old ones is really hard.
No, they're just going to exist how they exist. It's like I said, like Barcelona, they're not going to redo El Gático, put a freeway in there. Although they did that in some places in the U.S. when cars came in. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so the first answer is narrower. Why is it that we have such wide streets now? It's a safety measure. We don't trust that a human, fallible, distractible driver is going to be able to maintain their position in the middle of a lane with only a few centimeters of clearance on either side. We give lots of room so that if you wobble because you're changing the radio dial, or we don't change radio dials anymore, but if you're not paying full attention and you drift, it's not a catastrophe. In a world where we can expect the car to do its driving, I should say, that seems like a safety feature. It's actually an anti-safety feature, because when you build in those big buffers, people feel that they can drive faster. And it's speed that ends up causing accidents, and especially fatal ones. That's why if you want to make your city safer, the first thing you do is you narrow the lanes, because when people enter those narrow lanes, they instinctively slow down. Well, a driverless car will always be able to maintain dead on the center line, and it'll be able to actually move at whatever speed you want, whatever speed is appropriate for that space. It's not going to feel our instinctive human comfort or lack of comfort based on the narrowness of the lane. But I mean, as you know, nothing's more valuable in a city than real estate. So the less real estate you can provide for cars, the more value you unlock, the more space there is for any other pretty much any activity, whether it is more valuable than just extra space for cars. So new cities will have narrower lanes. So right away, you've got much more space that is available to them. That's the biggest unlock that you get.
So that would push the cities to be more dense. But then at the same time, if the cost of transportation is lower, Like if I'm able to work on my commute, I might be willing to live further from the city. So you could also see an argument maybe the cities would be less dense with driverless cars.
There's lots of ways in which this is going to move. I mean, if you can make cities more dense, one of the other things that you get is you can move around on foot, or you can take public transit. Like, what effect is self-driving going to have on public transit? And there's lots of ways that it could go. But one way that I can be absolutely certain of is that it's not going to displace the subway. Like, physics and geometry mean that in 100 years, people will still be using the subway to get around Manhattan. Because even if you've got the most efficient robotaxis in the world, you can't beat the subway for the amount of people, the amount of speed, and the distances it can reach. So if you make a city, like if you're building a city from scratch, you've certainly planned for automated vehicles, but you build a subway. If you make it super dense, well, people want to get around by the subway. They want to walk places. You don't need to build as much of your life around getting access to things by car. So I think there's a centrifugal force that makes cities denser. What happens when you're retrofitting, though, is there's a centripetal force, which is you sprawl more. And I wrote something about this, and we write about it in the book. Take your typical North American suburb. It's designed around the car. You really can't change that. There's very few suburbs that are able to add higher order transit and so get the sort of benefits that we have in downtown Toronto or we have in Manhattan. What does driving automation do to those places? Well, it just locks in driving even more. And so before, there were really hard limits into how much you could sprawl, not in terms of regulation or land use, just because how willing people were to drive.
Yeah.
But if you take that out of the equation, you probably know Marchetti's constant, which says that the most people want to travel in human history has been an hour each day. And so consequently, in ancient times, cities were designed around how far you could walk in an hour. But as we got better and better, as horses and carriages became more common, we got spread out. Cars spread out even further still, but only to about an hour. I think driving automation breaks Marchetti's constant.
Right, because you're working. I'm doing my first hour or two at work just in the car.
Yeah, working or playing video games or watching movies or whatever it is that you do. Now, the counterexample is, well, people don't want to do that on a train. They don't want to do that. They don't use transit. They still are limits. And to them, I say, but the difference is that you're with other people. Your car, a privately owned car, is this little air-conditioned bubble of personal space. You don't have to share it with anybody. And then you've got all the delights of your smartphone. Or even more than that, you can have a big screen TV in there if you want. If the car is driving, you don't need to. You don't even need windows. You can just be in a complete sensory deprivation bubble in there if you want. I think that breaks Marchetti's constant. We already spend so much of our lives on screens. If you do it in this personal space, I think people are willing to travel more. Travel longer because it doesn't feel as burdensome as it always will have been before. That's a recipe for more sprawl. And then more sprawl means even more congestion, which means even longer times in the car. So as much as I'm an enthusiast about driving automation, I can't escape the view that it is going to lock in patterns of life in the suburbs where we are more isolated, get less exercise, and have more of our lives mediated through screens.
Well, you could toss a treadmill in that driverless car, and then you're running while you're on the way home or something.
A friend of mine suggested she'd love to have a yoga studio in her car, and I just sort of burst her bubble and say, even in a self-driving world, there are limits to how wide the vehicles can be for turning purposes. So I don't know, maybe you're able to get a bench in there so you can do some bench presses, but a yoga studio is probably Probably out of the question.
You could
So
put
we're
some
almost,
pedals for
yeah,
for a bike, like a stationary bike.
yeah, I think you
Like
could. I think you could do it. I think you could do it. We're almost out of time, and I want to get your thoughts on some prediction markets. But while I get that ready, I don't know, Ariel, if you have any lingering questions for Andrew.
I did. I really enjoyed your substack on the endless emergency and this crisis of funding for public transportation. I wondered if you could describe that for listeners briefly, but also maybe talk about how do you think New York City could escape this endless emergency?
I have to be careful here because I have very good friends that work for the NTA, and I wouldn't want to accuse them of falling down on the job. The endless emergency is my pet name for the fact that in most places, public transit is at best adequate. And yet there's always a funding crisis. You always have people complaining who operate this. We need more money. And I think it is because public transit is not funded wholly through fares. It is funded partially through fares, but mostly in North America, mostly by public subsidy. And it's a well-known problem in development economics that if you are getting your money through subsidy rather than you are not responsive to the needs of the customer. And there's all sorts of opportunities for leakage. In a subsidy world, sadly, unions have no reason not to push for maximal wage increases because there's the wages aren't the fares aren't a ceiling on that. If you're going to have to pay us more, just go get more money from the State House. Management doesn't have a clear metric to point to as to what constitutes good service. They are lumbered with, so that means that bad managers can always hide. I'm not doing a bad job. Look at this one metric that I just cherry picked. We're doing great. And good managers have their hands are tied. Plus, we don't really know what we get out of the system. So politicians can say, and I've seen it happen, yeah, this particular bus line that you want to run, this route, it doesn't have very many users, but the users on it would complain and they're my voters. So I don't care how much money it loses, keep it running. All the problems come down to the fact that the customer isn't king. If a system was forced to make its living only on fares, but was allowed to charge the fares necessary to make the system work, that's one way out of the endless emergency. How is it? So what we need to do is we need to run a transit system that is capable of putting the needs of its riders first and foremost and paying all, or at least most of its bills that way. One way is through, fare reform, which I talk about. Another way is through density. It sounds perverse, but we should design not our transit system around the cities we want. We should design our cities around the transit systems we want. We should make it so that every subway stop has got a super skyscraper above it. Then you'd get enough ridership to make the system work. And we should automate. I talked about driving automation will help. Robotaxis will compete with the bus, but if a bus is automated, well, then you can get transit agencies taking advantage of this technology. And I hope and expect that they will if their unions permit them to do so. But in essence, the argument is that transit in so many places is not great. And it's because we are not willing to experiment with our model. There's lots of ways we could experiment, but the first thing we need to admit is that we have a problem and something dramatic needs to change.
Nothing's going to change, Ariel. Sounds like. Sounds like it.
We're going to make the buses free. That's going to solve the ridership problem.
You got to wait for the Waymos, I guess, in Manhattan. All right. Like I said, we're almost out. But Andrew, if I can get you just quickly make some money here on the prediction markets. So I have some questions that I found on Manifold, and just to get your quick reaction, can you see my screen? Just to see your thoughts on this. What significant changes in modern life will occur by the year 2030? We have fully driverless cars are greater than 1% of miles driven in the US. Do you say yes or do you say no on that?
So, no one knows for sure, but I worked it out that right now, in 2025, the percentage of total trips taken by robotaxi in the United States in any given time period is something like 0.000067.
So you're saying there's a chance. Will a city ban manually driven cars on at least one public road lane by 2030? It sounds like, I guess Market doesn't count for this? Market Street doesn't already count for this?
No, it's banned is private cars, but taxis are still allowed on there along with emergency vehicles.
Okay.
But by 2030, it depends on how strict we are being. I cannot imagine that any city will ban emergency vehicles. Like if a human-driven ambulance or fire truck needs to be on that, that'll always be permitted. But as written, no, it won't happen. If we were to add the stipulation that excluding emergency vehicles, I would rate this as higher. I would think that at least one city is going to do it. Let's say 60%.
All right. So we
but
would
only
buy
with that stipulation.
All right, last one. Will any car drive itself from the Empire State Building to the Golden Gate Bridge before April 2028?
If we interpret this as could a car do it? Yes. Will it happen? It has to be permitted to do it. So I'm currently working with my friends at the Canadian Automated Vehicle Initiative. We are trying to launch a project where we're going to have a self-driving truck go from Halifax to Vancouver by 2028. And it is an insanely ambitious thing, not because we couldn't get the truck to do it, but because we would need permission from 10 provinces and one national government to make that happen. That I don't know if it's even possible to get all of those permissions in place. For this, how many states are there between New York City and California?
Well, there's different routes you could take. So you could, I mean, you probably would only need about 20 states approval, would be my guess. So it's still a lot.
In April 28, I would not, I feel like I'm struggling up a hill to try and get 10 provinces. To get 20 states, the amount of effort you would need to do, I can't see it happening. So I would rate this as no, this won't happen.
You could also just do it illegally. You know, the Cannonball Run. So they used to, you know, the Cannonball Run, I don't know if they still do the Cannonball Run. They used to have a race, you know, from New York to LA, I believe it was. You'd race across the country and it was all illegal. You could think of some, I don't know, rogue operator.
You are right. I don't think this says.
It doesn't say it has to be legal. It's just, yeah.
Oh, well, then, yeah. I mean, it's just some like crazy kids at MIT do it and then film it and then don't tell anyone they're going to do it. Yeah, that it absolutely could happen.
All right. So that's a little optimistic. I was getting down because you were saying basically no on all these ones. All right. Well, yeah, that's about time. So thank you for coming on. Listeners, viewers, please check out Changing Lanes and then the End of Driving coming out. You said what, end of September it was? Yeah, appreciate you speaking with us.
It's been a pleasure.